Hi everyone, welcome back to DGMZ for a new weekend episode. For all our returning viewers, we are so glad you can join us again. And for the new viewers, we are very happy that you have discovered us and tuned into the podcast for the first time. As always, for the new viewers, my strong recommendation to access the introduction episode because that would give you a good insight into the inspiration, the motivation, and the objective of this podcast. Just for your awareness, we have two playlists. One playlist focuses on these weekend episodes where we cover one ghazal at a time from Diwan-e-Ghalib, and the other playlist is reserved for other topics uh, in addition to these ghazal impressions. These topics are still focused on Urdu poetry, Mirza Ghalib, but yeah, not the ghazal impressions. So do explore both the playlists and access episodes which seem to be interesting to you. Now, today is a continuation episode because we are right now spending time with the 10th ghazal from Diwan-e-Ghalib. And this is a fairly long ghazal. इसमें 12 शेर हैं. अब पूरे के पूरे 12 एक एपिसोड में कवर करना पॉसिबल नहीं है. So we had one episode already where we covered the first four couplets. Today, I am planning to cover the next four. And I think we will need one more episode to go through the last four couplets. So, आई थिंक 3 एपिसोड्स में हम ये गज़ल कवर करेंगे. एंड ऑफ कोर्स इन इस गज़ल को ब्रेक किया है ताकि आपको भी सुनने में सहूलियत हो, मेरे को भी रिकॉर्ड करने में सहूलियत हो. अदरवाइज़ एपिसोड बहुत लंबा हो जाता और we don't want to cut corners, right? We want to spend time with these couplets, get into the stories behind them, and all that good stuff. So, like I always do, I will read through the ghazal, but not the whole ghazal with 12 couplets. I'm going to read the ones we are going to cover today. I've already read the whole ghazal for you in the first episode, so if you're interested, you can access the first episode for the full ghazal narration. But today I will go through 5th, 6th, 7th and 8th couplet because वो हम लोग आज cover करेंगे अपने एपिसोड में. सो अर्ज किया है, किया aaina-khane का वो नक्शा तेरे जलवे ने, किया aaina-khane का वो नक्शा तेरे जलवे ने, करे जो परताव-ए-खुर्शीद आलम शबनमिस्ता का. मेरी तामीर में मुजम्मर है एक सूरत खराबी की, मेरी तामीर में मुजम्मर है एक सूरत खराबी की, हयूला barq-e-khirman का है khun-e-garm दहका का. उगा है घर में हर सू सब्ज़ वीरानी तमाशा कर, उगा है घर में हर सू सब्ज़ वीरानी तमाशा कर, मदार अब खोदने पर घास के है मेरे दरबा का. खामोशी में नहीं खुगश्ता लाखों आरजुएं हैं, खामोशी में निहा खुगश्ता लाखों आरजुएं हैं. I said nahi, apologize for that, it's niha. So let me read that one more time. खामोशी में निहा खुगश्ता लाखों आरजुएं हैं, चरागे मुर्दा हूँ मैं बेज़बा गोरे गरेबा का. ओके, सो ये 4 शेर आज हम लोग कवर करेंगे. For continuation, feel free to access the first episode if you want to get into the first 4 impressions before you listen into these. Okay, so 5वां शेर, किया aaina-khane का वो नक्शा तेरे जलवे ने, करे जो परताव-ए-खुर्शीद आलम शबनमिस्ता का. शेर को पढ़ के ही ऐसा लगता है कि ओ माय गॉड, सो मच लाइट, रेडियंस, इल्यूमिनेशन। येट दैट बैकग्राउंड थीम ऑफ डिस्ट्रक्शन कंटिन्यूज। सो जो पहले के भी चार शेर थे, उसमें गालिब ने डिस्ट्रक्शन, ख़त्म होना, फना होना, अलग अलग पहलुओं से उसको कवर किया है। एंड अब इसमें एक अलग ही किस्म का बड़ा खूबसूरत डिस्ट्रक्शन इंजॉय करने को मिलता है इस कपलेट में। So let's do an approximate translation before we get into the impression. So किया आईना खाने का वो नक्शा तेरे जलवे ने. So your countenance or radiance has completely changed the structure of this house made of mirrors or full of mirrors. And the change your countenance has brought to the house reminds me of, that's what's in the second line, करे जो partaw-e-khurshid alam shabnam istaka. It reminds me of how the warmth of the sun, it reminds me of what the warmth of the sun, of what the sunlight does to a field full of morning dew. It's a beautiful sher. मतलब like I said, love and light इस शेर में जैम पैक्ड है. सो शेर प्रिटी सीधा है. आई मीन इट्स प्रिटी स्ट्रेट फॉरवर्ड. इसमें बहुत ज़्यादा कॉम्प्लेक्सिटी नहीं है, बट खूबसूरत बहुत है फिर भी अपनी सिंप्लिसिटी में. सो पहली लाइन में गालिब इज सेइंग दैट व्हेन यू एंटर अ रूम, when you come into a gathering, when you come in a place which is illuminated, and that is why this parallel he's drawing to a room full of mirrors, right? So you can imagine a room full of mirrors would be full of reflection, full of light, fully illuminated. That is the idea, to have mirrors all around, lot of reflection, lot of light, lot of illumination. So Ghalib is saying, when you come into the room or step into a room which has mirrors all around, by extension, when you go to a place which is already highly illuminated, highly lit up or fully lit up, you change the entire structure of that place. By extension, the light you bring with you, the radiance you bring with you, changes the entire paradigm, the entire dynamic of an already fully illuminated lit place. That is the power of your light. And in the second line, he goes on to say that this is where you and the effect your light has on these mirrors reminds me of the sun. The way the sun comes up in the morning and starts to shine on this field full of morning dew. So the first few initial rays will just increase the countenance and the magnificence of that field full of mountain dew, because for some time the dew can handle it can handle sunlight, and sunlight just adds to its beauty and makes it shine even more. But then this is sun. A mountain dew cannot survive that long. Initially, it might be able to absorb the sunlight and, reflect it back and shine more. But after some time, the intensity of the light that the sun is sending its way is too much for it, and it melts. And not only melts, it it's over. That is the life of that dewdrop once the sun is out. It's a very short life. Initially it might shine a little brighter than it usually would, but then after that it cannot handle the intensity of the sun, the warmth it is sending its way, and the dew melts away. And that's what the beloved does to light around her. I, I mean, of course, we are talking about a room full of mirrors, but um, Ghalib, for all practical purposes, is saying that once you, my beloved, steps into a place, in a room, in a gathering, anywhere, everything else dims. They might shine a little brighter for us for a few seconds, just because you are shining on them, but then after that the intensity and the countenance and the radiance you emit will make these mirrors melt, will make all these other light sources melt. And though he's using mirrors here, it is pretty clear he's saying anything which is glorified in its own way, right? Or anything which is lit up in its own way cannot stand a chance. Once you enter the room, they will get extinguished, they will get overpowered, they will melt away, they will end, get destructed, because nobody can hold a light to you. No pun intended. Nobody can hold a light to you. Nobody can stand a chance in front of you. So, just a very beautiful way of saying that you are the best. Once you arrive, everything else fades into the background. There's no one that compares to you. Once you arrive, and sure, the beloved is beautiful, and probably everybody feels like that, but Ghalib specifically establishes the fact that once you arrive, everything for me fades into the background. In fact, everything becomes dark. You are the only light I see. The other things might flicker for a little bit, but they just extinguish as far as I am concerned. You are the only light. Beautiful. And then, like I always say, the power of observation and the power of imagination. So, observation का पावर आपको वो शबनम के एग्जाम्पल में दिखता है कि हाउ what an astute observation that yes, the sun will come out, this field full of mountain dew will probably for the first few minutes shine even brighter when the sun is hitting them, but then as the sun continues to hit that field, the intensity of the sun starts to impact the the survival of this mountain dew. Sorry. Probably I need a cold drink. Sorry. The impact of the sun rays starts impacting these dewdrops, and they will not be able to uh, hold on for too long. They will melt away, they will end. And then the power of imagination is that room full of mirrors wherein the beloved enters. The mirrors shine for a bit, but then they start melting. That is the warmth, the heat, the intensity of her radiance and countenance. Okay, moving on to the next sher. अगेन आप देखते जाइए डिस्ट्रक्शन के कितने अलग अलग पहलू। तो एक डिस्ट्रक्शन तो यहाँ देख लिया मिरर्स और ड्यू ड्रॉप का। अब ये बिल्कुल एक अलग ही टाइप का डिस्ट्रक्शन है इन दिस शेर। मेरी तामीर में मुजम्मर है एक सूरत खराबी की, हयूला barq-e-khirman का है खून-e-garm दहका का। So approximately when translated what this means is that Ghalib is saying that I've come to realize that in my construction, in my building blocks, in my structural blueprint, there seems to be a flaw. There seems to be an inherent flaw in the design itself. We call it manufacturing defect. So Ghalib is saying in my structure there is this inherent flaw. It is not something from outside, it is something from inside. My existence, my being itself is made this way, designed this way, created this way, that it has this inherent flaw of misfortune, loss. So this is not an external factor. This is an inherent uh, structural component, if you may, of me, my existence. And what is that inherent structural component which he calls a flaw? Misfortune. Misfortune. Buri kismat. Lack of kismat, bad kismat. And then again, in the second line, he will give you an example which is going to help you enjoy and grasp and visualize what exactly he means in the first line. So the second line, when approximately translated, means that the actual body, the actual mass or content of lightning that strikes a granary. So what is the body? What is the actual mass or content of lightning? Heat. Heat. That's what it is made of. Heat. So Ghalib is saying the actual content of what the lightning is made up of is actually fed by the heat of the blood of the farmer. And now we'll unpack it in the impression, and it will sound less strange. It will start making sense. So पहली बात तो गालिब, like I said, बोल रहे हैं कि हमारा तो एग्जिस्टेंस ही फ्लॉड है. माई एग्जिस्टेंस इट सेल्फ इज़ फ्लॉड बिकॉज इसके अंदर एक इनहेरेंट स्ट्रक्चरल फ्लॉ है of misfortune. And then in the example, he is giving the example of this granary. So let's go back in time and try to visualize what he's talking about, right? So पुराने ज़माने में ग्रेन का जो प्रोसेस है उसके 4 स्टेप्स हैं. हार्वेस्टिंग, थ्रेशिंग, विनोइंग एंड स्टोरिंग. हार्वेस्टिंग इज़ जब आपका अनाज पक गया है तो अब आप उसको हार्वेस्ट करेंगे. एंड थ्रेशिंग है जहाँ आप अनाज को उसकी स्टॉक से अलग करते हैं. सो हार्वेस्टिंग, वन ऑफ द स्टेप्स इज थ्रेशिंग. थ्रेशिंग इज़ व्हेन यू रिमूव द ग्रेन from the stalk it was on. Winnowing is the next step where you remove the grain from the cover it is in, right? And then lastly storing. You store it in the granary. So in olden times, uh, initially threshing was done by hand, where manually people used to remove the grain from the stalk and its cover, right? Um, the husk actually. Then it evolved a little and came to a state where they started tying these stalks of uh, ready to harvest grain and started beating them on the floor. The other way was they used to use the stick, which was called flail. So what they did was they uh, tied a few sticks together, made a sort of a wand, if you may, with it, and then spread the grain on the floor and used to beat the grain. Now that would also separate the grain from the stalk and from the chaff. Um, and then of course this process evolved where they started using animals to walk on the grain, and they used to create this high platform where the animals would walk on the grain and separate the grain from the stalk, and then they used to leave it there, and when the wind blew, it would blow away the light weight chaff and leave the heavy grain behind, and that's why that platform used to be high. So in the threshing, usually one would notice that threshing at times causes static electricity, because the grain is absolutely dry, right? When it is ready for harvest, it's absolutely dry, and it is actually inflammable. It can catch fire very fast. It can catch fire very fast. And if you rub these ready to harvest, absolutely dry stalks of grain together, or probably beat them on the floor or beat them with the stick, it does at times produce static electricity. So good to know that you know uh, electricity from the heaven, sure, but otherwise also this ready to harvest grain is pretty inflammable. So what Ghalib is saying is that this this lightning that hits the granary many a times, right? Um, the heat of this lightning is actually the heat of the blood of the farmer. And by extension, it means the toil, the effort. जैसे लोग बोलते हैं खून पसीने से सींचा, right? We used our sweat and blood to tend to this crop. So, what Ghalib is saying is that each and every drop of sweat and blood that farmer, in all his innocence, right, puts into rearing these harvests, those drops of blood, it's their heat which this lightning uses to destroy the same crop. You cannot blame the farmer. You cannot blame the farmer. His blood is boiling, or his blood is uh, toiling, if you may, to just nurture these crop, this crop, right? That's all he wants to do. He's using his sweat and blood to nurture this crop so that it is ready for harvest. But this lightning uses that same heat, that same intensity and passion, if you may, of that sweat and blood that he uses to tend to his crop. This lightning uses the same heat to then destroy the crop. And that is where that misfortune, it was not meant to destroy the crop. The heat in his blood and sweat was meant to tend to the crop. But here comes this lightning, which uses that same heat to actually destroy the crop. And you cannot blame the farmer for it, because he didn't mean that heat to be used this way. He meant to use that heat for nurturing the crop. But still, it is his blood's heat. And that is where one can in all unfairness say, well, shouldn't have put so much sweat and blood in this, right? Look what happened. It's a great crop, ready for harvest, dry, and a magnet, almost a magnet to lightning, urging lightning to strike it. Because lightning and fire, they get attracted by things which are inflammable, right? So, inevitably, though not meaning to, the farmer tends the crop to bring it to a stage where it becomes a sitting duck for lightning to strike it. And so that is the example, but of course, by extension, Ghalib is saying that this is exactly what happens in love. Just like the farmer, we are putting a lot of emotion, we are putting a lot of investment, we are putting a lot of feelings into loving someone. That's all what we meant to do. All what we meant to do was to just love them with whatever we have, right? Just invest in them, whatever we have. But inevitably, somewhere, we land up giving them the power to destruct us. We'll end up giving them the power to destruct us. Very interesting. Very, very interesting. Moving on to the next sher. उगा है घर में हर सू सब्जा, वीरानी तमाशा कर, मदार अब खोदने पर घास के है मेरे दरबार का. एंड आप सारे एग्जाम्पल्स देखिए, तभी गालिब, दैट इज वाई गालिब इज कॉल्ड द पोएट ऑफ कॉमन मैन. And a poet that kept the literary elites, the honorary, always confused and caught up in his mazes. एक कॉमन मैन के लिए तो मतलब बिल्कुल ऐसा लग रहा है कि जैसे किसी किसान के घर में है. अब इसमें भी आपको ऐसा ही लगेगा. जो एग्जाम्पल्स गालिब यूज़ करते हैं वो इतने down to earth, they are so down to earth, they are of the common man and not the upper middle class common man. They are of the common man from lower middle class or the common man in the poverty class. And that's why they are so touching. That's why in the background you subconsciously are already perceiving Ghalib as the poet of the common man. ये सेकंड एग्जाम्पल, ये वाली इस वाले शेर में भी वैसा ही एग्जाम्पल है. So let's do a quick approximate translation. उगा है घर में हर सू सब्ज़ा, वीरानी तमाशा कर. So what he's saying is that in my house, I can see green everywhere. I can see greenery everywhere. And this is a spectacle of desolation, virani, desolation, loneliness, emptiness. So this greenery in my house is a spectacle of desolation and loneliness. And in the second line he says, मदार अब खोदने पर घास के है मेरे दरबा का. So darba is the doorkeeper or the gatekeeper or the security of your house, right? The security person. And Ghalib is saying that now the security person or the gatekeeper or the doorkeeper has only one task left to do, and that is to weed this grass growing in the house. So let's get into the impression of it. उगा है घर में हर सू सब्जा. Everywhere in the house, I can see green. Now, what is that all about? You're not supposed to see growing green in your house, inside the house. It's supposed to be outside in the garden, right? But in the olden times, we have to keep in mind that the earliest flooring, which at least we are aware of, were all made from natural materials, easily available natural materials, which included dirt, clay, rocks, and even packed dirt. Now, all these materials are very conducive for weeds to grow, very conducive for weeds to grow. And that is where this is happening. So when a house is well kept, there are a lot of people brooming, cleaning, washing, all that good stuff. These weeds don't get a chance to grow. Otherwise, the content of olden times, the content of the floor in olden times was such that it was conducive to having weeds grow if you do not disturb them, clean them, broom them, right? The floors could get that. And even if stones were used, right? The stones were also, there was no cement, so the stones were also joined with each other using clay. So maybe on the stone you would not have weed, but those ridges between two stones, right, where you would pack clay or dirt to hold the stones in place, would have those green weeds coming up. So what Ghalib, and again, just see the simplicity, just see the detail um, of of a thing which is so part of your daily life, right? One can never imagine that somebody could describe it in such a way and use it as an example for something so intense and emotional. But that is Ghalib for you, and that is why I'm a fan. So he says that in my house you can see green everywhere now, and this green is actually a spectacle, an exhibition, a visualization of desolation that fills the house now, the emptiness that fills the house now. Nobody walks on these floors. Nobody brooms these floors. Nobody takes care of this house. I am here, but not here. I'm gone for all practical purposes. Even if I'm here, I'm not here. That is my mental state. That is my emotional state. I'm totally absent from the world and the worldly things. I'm so completely engulfed in the pain and the misery and the grief and the emptiness I feel inside me that there is a total neglect of my surroundings from me. And that's why in my house you see green all over. And this green, I'm telling you, it is a proof, a visual proof of the loneliness and the emptiness that fills this house of mine. And then in the second word, the second line, he says that my gatekeeper, housekeeper, in olden times, you used to have, what is that word called? Man Friday kind of a person, right? Who will just do everything for you in addition to taking care of the house, protecting it, guarding it. So he's saying that my doorkeeper or my guard today has only one task available that he can do, and that's weeding this grass. And he does it. And this is where a little humor comes in, right? I mean, imagine a security guy weeding your garden, right? So Ghalib is saying he also has to justify his post, his probably salary or whatever. He also has to justify his role. And since he knows nobody is going to come in this house, nobody is going to go from this house, nothing is happening in this house, there's just no life in this house, this is a dead house, for himself and for me, he says, well, at least let me do something. Okay, maybe I'll just go ahead and weed this place up, because at least that is something which is growing, right? So it gives me a job to do, it gives me something to do. The detail. And what is Ghalib trying to do with all this detail? Quantify. Quantify the extent of desolation, emptiness, and loneliness he holds within him, and how it is spilling now around him in his surrounding. बहुत बहुत दुख भरा शेर. एंड गालिब का स्टाइल है, कोई देर इज़ नथिंग फैंसी अबाउट इट. एक टूटे से घर में, एक अकेले घर में, एक निगलेक्टेड घर में बैठे हैं, और जो वीराना बाहर देख रहे हैं वही वीराना अंदर है उनके, या ये कह लीजिए कि जो वीराना अंदर है अब वो बाहर भी दिख रहा है, अब वो बाहर भी दिख रहा है. Moving on to the 8th sher, which will be the last one which we cover in this episode. खामोशी में निहा खूं गश्ता लाखों आरजुएं हैं. So he's saying, in this silence, there are a million desires that have overturned or have become unfulfilled or never got fulfilled. चरागे मुर्दा हूँ मैं बेज़बां गोरे गरिबां का. So चरागे मुर्दा, a dead lamp. Well, an alive lamp would be a lit lamp, so a dead lamp is an extinguished lamp. Silent lamp. A talking lamp would be again a lit lamp. So he's saying, I am a dead, silent lamp of Gore Gareba. Gore Gareba is Gore's grave. Gareba is, it is basically a graveyard meant for the poor, the strangers, the lost. So, yeah, he's saying, of that graveyard, I am a dead, silent lamp or candle. So, of course, this is a very heavy, this is a very heavy sher with lot of एक किस्म की, you know, you enjoy till you see a fight. There's a kind of defeat in this sher, which hurts. Let's get into the impression. खामोशी में निहा, so खामोशी, silence, निहा, hidden. So in this silence, there are hidden खूं गश्ता लाखों आरजुएं हैं, a million desires that never got converted into reality, that remained unfulfilled, that reverted on the path of fulfillment, turned back, came back. Khun gashta is wandering, making rounds, traveling, walking a path, a set path, and khun is blood. So what Ghalib is saying is, this silence that you hear now, right? In this silence, there is hidden a million desires who were at some point of time or at one point in time desires which were alive. They were alive. They were pumping with blood. They had a passionate energy and intensity in them of being fulfilled. A million desires. वो जैसे वो बोला ही है उन्होंने, उनका तो कितना प्यारा वो शेर है कि हज़ारों ख्वाहिशें ऐसी कि हर ख्वाहिश पे दम निकले. So he was the type who had a million desires and in every single desire he would put all his life, all his blood, all his intensity, all his passion. So he's saying today you hear this silence, but don't get fooled. Don't get fooled, because in this silence are hidden a million desires which at one point in time were full of life, making a lot of noise, the movers and shakers. And over time, they have bled slowly to death. It's been a slow kill. And हम तो जानते हैं desires don't die easily. Once you desire something with this intensity, it is not easy to kill that desire. बहुत टाइम लग जाता है, क्योंकि उम्मीद एक ऐसी चीज़ है जो कि ज़िंदा रखती है डिज़ायर को, आपकी ख्वाहिश को. उम्मीद को मारने के लिए बहुत टाइम लगता है. Hope is not something you can kill fast and furious. It takes a long time. Glimmer of hope just is enough to keep that desire burning. So Ghalib is trying to quantify that अब मैं इस मुकाम पर पहुंच गया हूँ. I have reached a state where million desires, I started with a million roaring blood pumping, intense, energetic desires. And today I am at a state that all of those desires have bled slowly to death. Not fast. Have died a slow death. Have bled slowly, bit by bit. I kept holding on to them as long as I could. All of them have bled to death. And now, all you hear is silence. But I want to tell you, don't get fooled by the silence. In this silence are hidden these million desires. And then the second line is even more painful. So before we get into the impression of the second line, let's spend some time on this gore gareba. So like I said, usually there are graveyards or cemeteries which are organized or created especially for people who are poor, who cannot afford a full-fledged funeral, or for people who do not have anybody. So they are almost strangers. They do not have family or friends who will give them a proper burial. And those people also come into these cemeteries. So गोरे गरेबा एक बहुत ही खूबसूरत concept है. It's a beautiful concept in Urdu poetry. Talking of a graveyard where all these souls with no identity, anonymous souls, right? Souls that were lost in anonymity when they were alive. ऐसे souls के लिए वो जगह है. This cemetery is a place for all those souls to meet. And just to give you a little more background around this concept of gore gareba, let me quote a few shares here. Let me see. ए सबा औरों की तुरबत पे गुल अफशानी चांद। ए सबा औरों की तुरबत पे गुल अफशानी चांद, जानिबे गोरे गरेबा भी कभी आया कर। This one is from Mushafi Ghulam Hamdani. So, approximately translated, it means uh, moon, right? In all your beauty in the night, you just keep shining on graves of uh, other people. I request you to also come to Gore Gareba, where there are graves of anonymous people, poor people, people who had nobody to give them a burial, right? Strangers. I request you to shine your light equally on those graves too, and not just shine your light on the so-called elites who are buried. एक और शेर है सकीब लखनवी का। सरे गोरे गरेबा कुछ न पूछो हाले दिल सकीब। सरे गोरे गरेबा कुछ न पूछो हाले दिल सकीब। ज़माना जिनको भुलाया है हम उनको याद करते हैं। So, approximately translated, it says that do not ask me what my heart goes through when I'm sitting in this Gore Gareba, right? This cemetery for the forgotten, the lost, the anonymous. Because when I pass through this cemetery, I am reminded of all the people who the world has forgotten. I am remembering someone, or I remember someone when I pass this cemetery, I remember someone who the world has forgotten. So again, just emphasizing the concept that yes, the cemetery is meant for people who are forgotten, who are lost, anonymous, strangers. And then last sher from Sagar Khayami. ए राह रवाए गोरे गरेबा खामोश हो, ए राह रवाए गोरे गरेबा खामोश हो, सोए हैं सोने वाले शबे गम गुजार के। Beautiful sher hai, beautiful sher hai. Approximately it translates to be quiet. Be quiet in this Gore Gareba, right? Be quiet in this cemetery. Do not make movement and noise. Be quiet, because the people who rest here have completed long nights of misery, pain, and loss. These are injured people. These are people who have borne a lot of pain and misery and suffering and loss. So be very respectful, be very quiet, because finally these troubled, tortured souls are resting here. Finally. So yeah, that aptly sets the background for getting into the impression of this sher. So let's see. खामोशी, oh, I'm sorry. Yeah. खामोशी में निहा खुगश्ता लाखों आरजुए हैं. We covered that. चरागे मुर्दा हूँ मैं बेज़बां गोरे गरेबा का. So Ghalib is saying, I am that lamp, that silent, dead, extinguished lamp on the grave of a stranger in this cemetery. This cemetery, Gore Gareba, this cemetery of lost souls. And this is where and this is not a technical word, but this is how I perceive it. This is where you see the layering Ghalib does. Layering of the same point. So, number one, I am an extinguished silent lamp. So basically, I'm dead. technically I'm dead. Now, I am not an extinguished silent lamp in a house where come evening somebody will come and light me again, right? No, no, no. I am an extinguished silent dead lamp on a grave. Now, people don't often visit graves, right? Nobody comes and light lamps on graves every day. So once a lamp is extinguished on a grave, it will be quite a while before someone comes and lights it up. So a dead lamp and then on a grave. So the chances of getting lit ever again are minimal. And now this grave is in Gore-Gareba. It is in a graveyard which is meant for lost anonymous souls. So anyway, nobody is going to come to the grave, and if that grave is in this cemetery, forget it. There are no chances. So Ghalib is quantifying. He's quantifying the extent of isolation, the extent of death, the extent of anonymity he embodies or he experiences in his life. Not just dead lamp, but a dead lamp on a grave. And not just any grave, but a grave in the cemetery meant for lost and anonymous and strange souls. So yeah, he leaves no room for doubt. He leaves no room for hope. When he wants to, he can create room for hope in the most hopeless situations. But when he doesn't want to, he will eliminate every scope for any hope. That's what he does here. And that's the mastery of Mirza. That no, no, no. Do not think that I'm only talking about an extinguished lamp, which probably will get lit someday. No, this is not going to get lit. This is not going to get lit. Minimal to no chance of me ever getting lit again. And that lamp. Very sad. Anyway, that brings us to the end of the 8th couplet. So today we have, thanks to 2 episodes, covered 8 couplets of this ghazal. Now in the next episode we will complete this ghazal where we will get into the last 4 couplets. I sincerely hope you enjoyed listening to this impression, and I hope you will join me for the third and the last continuation episode for this ghazal. Till then everyone, love and light. Thanks for watching.